We had a plan already though, with chief, we had a work.
Yeah. You're ready.
All right, so I will start our work session at 8:46 to talk about employee handbook. Craig,
Thank you.
7:46?
7:46, yes.
I was about to say, that meeting didn't feel that long.
So I'll turn this over to Lydia, but I do know we had this scheduled for a work session tonight and bring it back on the 18th. If we don't get that far tonight, then we need to actually have another work session. If you're not feeling comfortable, then we'll bring it back on the 18th for a future work session. And the goal was to try to implement it around the first of the month with the ASME contract, but we don't get there. We can always implement after the first of the month. So not a big deal. So I just want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable with what's in the main. So Lydia?
Hi, Graves. Thanks for the color coding. Your rock scenes.
You're welcome. We've got some feedback and we like to respond to feedback. Well, thank you, everybody. So just to explain to you, what you have in front of you is a copy of the proposed draft handbook for 2024. And then you have one loose sheet, and I'll explain why that's loose momentarily. And then in addition, I extracted from the employee handbook the color-coded items, because they really are the items that are of the most significant change or are something, you know, that we really want to get input or a decision from council on. So I thought rather than have everybody flick page after page after page through this, by pulling out those color-coded areas, we can kind of focus our time and energy on that, being cognitive of your time. The loose sheet that you have, and please accept my apologies for this, the loose sheet that you have is around our use of email and electronic equipment. It is loose because Sebastian and I just this very morning made a couple of modifications to the policy to try and make it a little more practical and realistic. But we were waiting for some suggestions on that language. We got it this morning, we sat down, and so there is a slight variation to what you have had emailed to you. And I can run through what those differences are. They are minor, but I can run through them. But that's why that sheet is pulled out and separate. So to just kind of run through the changes as we have in them, I do not want to labor any points here, but as we're all aware, the handbook that we have in operation currently dates back to 2012. There have been some standalone policies, some administrative policies that have changed over time, but the actual bulk of that handbook has remained in place since then. So in this version, I couldn't give you a line by line because this is a true overhaul of the handbook. This is a change in terms of the numbering, the language, the intent of nearly all of these policies remain the same, but it's just modernizing them and making them more appropriate for 2024. So just to give you, again, I do not want to labor this, but just to give you some context as to why this is so important. This is just a snapshot of the significant employment law or wage and hour laws that have changed since the handbook went in place. So doing this has been no small task. I know that there have been draft versions previously, and we've incorporated, or I've incorporated that into this. So the reason that there are only a few sections highlighted is because anything that is not highlighted is either in the CIS template recommended handbook, or it's lifted directly from the handbook as is and has no alteration to it other than verbiage to modernize it, but the intent or the application of the policy is unaltered. Which is why, again, just there are fewer areas that are highlighted. But what I wanted to do was try and just draw your attention to those changes. Let me see if I can move this up too. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Scott. So anything that's highlighted in green in here mirrors an AFSCME policy that is new into a handbook, but that has gone into a collective bargaining agreement. And what I heard from council previously was that they want non-reps to, as closely as possible, mirror those terms that are agreed with AFSCME. And so this just reflects that. So you'll see that the longevity policy and the sabbatical policy that were agreed for AFSCME are now incorporated into this handbook under exactly the same terms. There is no change to that term at all. The other change that is in here is around how paid leave Oregon interacts with PTO. It was difficult to categorize what this change is, whether it's discretionary, whether it's something that mirrors AFSCME. There is a discretionary element that I want to bring to council's attention around how we as a city allow leave to be used with paid leave Oregon, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail when we reach that page, because I do think it's significant and enough that I would want to raise the attention to it. The policy that is brand new to you here, and it is not a CIS policy, is a telecommuting policy. And so you hopefully had emailed out to you that policy extracted on an individual basis. That is a policy that one of my predecessors had been working on with legal counsel. We as a leadership team have discussed it, and that's our recommended policy that we would like to propose to council, but obviously we don't have anything other than the kind of emergency COVID telecommute policy in place currently. And so I think the leadership team wanted to try and more formalize what those working from home arrangements would be, and to just get some emphasis in place that it is not a right to work from home. It really is a discretionary policy and subject to certain kind of rules and a framework.
And it seems, am I correct in that you reviewed and took input from what other businesses and other local governments have in place to glean ideas from things that you like to help craft this language?
Yes, we did. Yeah, so and actually it's quite interesting because jurisdictions are moving in two completely polar opposite directions to one another. Some are bringing everybody back into the workplace, and others are saying this is great, we can reduce our overhead and the number of facilities by allowing people to work from home. So it's been quite an interesting thing to research. Where we landed, as you will have read in the policy, is that we would like to have the ability to offer some hybrid working arrangements where it best serves the public, but with a kind of cap on the fact that we're saying no more than the equivalent of 2 days a week at home, because we are here really in a public facing capacity. So I think the discussion around the leadership table was such that we wanted to really have staff be present as much as possible.
And if I read,
Is it?
go ahead. Oh, if I read, when this takes place, or if it has not, that there'll be a telecommuting agreement for each staff member. So if we agree to Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's gonna be Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's not Wednesday this week and Friday next week type thing, or, I mean.
So
But there'll be some sort of between the manager and the employee of,
yes,
so everybody knows what everybody's doing.
yes,
I assume this applies position by position, like certain positions wouldn't apply.
Correct.
This wouldn't apply to, they're not
Yeah.
eligible at all.
correct.
And
And
other types
I
of positions.
I cannot emphasize enough how much we've tried to focus in the policy that this is not an automatic right. This is not an eligibility. This is something where if it benefits the city and a role to do this, then it will be considered, but this is by no means a right. You know,
Like there's one person in community services that could potentially get it out of everybody.
Yeah.
Just because we're public facing and
Yeah.
need people at
Can't
facilities.
mow the lawn from home.
Need the librarian to check out books.
You can mow your home lawn, you can't mow the city lawn.
Maybe.
exactly. But yeah, so to answer your question, Councillor Mays, yes, we have we're trying to collect the best of the best and make something that works for us in our environment, but is also practical to apply. And that was a big theme throughout this, was just trying to make things practical and realistic.
And to apply with fairness.
Yes.
Right, because you don't have a bunch of people claiming, well, he gets to and I don't get to, and what the criteria is as clear as can be. There's still discretion applied, but there's some guidelines and clarity around it.
Yeah, there are. I mean, we have put scope in there for a fair amount of management discretion. We want department heads to be able to determine what's the best need for their department, but Yes,
But if they had two people in the exact same position and they said one can and one can,
then that would.
they have to have a good
Correct.
explanation for that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And I think I read somewhere that working from home means not childcare, like
Yes.
you're not in place of dependent care. And then the other one was they have to be able to get to the office at a reasonable amount of time.
you have to be
So
able to report to
not working
duty.
from home on vacation.
Yeah, you can't be on a beach, unfortunately, on a beach in the Bahamas and on your laptop and picking up a call. You need to be mentally present and working.
It looked fine to me. Other.
Okay, does anybody have any further questions on the telecommute policy? Because I know that was a new policy and a new concept for council.
Does, well, it's different. The stuff that, like this one's brand new and we
Yeah.
did something during COVID in which the city council reviewed and blessed it in a resolution, I believe, right? It does, if the city council, if everyone on the table is comfortable with the telecommunications policy, is it just something to approve in the document or do people want to have it separate and voted on in a meeting as a standalone policy? I'm just asking the question. I'm not giving an opinion.
Maybe a slight variation of that is, was there any thought or discussion around? Let's enact this as a policy under a 1-year trial and it automatically expires unless we renew it or something like, or it has to be reviewed after a period. Just to see how it works.
We didn't. I mean, what we have in there is that it can be revoked at any time.
Covers the
So,
same.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure, don't want to misspeak. There's a notice period for the change and it's a couple of weeks.
1
to-
week, I think.
Yeah, to revoke that policy. So if for some reason we find that's not something we want to move forward with.
And this doesn't have any bearing on, hey, we had a snowstorm, everybody worked a lot of hours or anything like that, and so we're giving them time off to compensate for a day. I mean, I know, or like, you guys have to stay late for meetings.
No, that's
Elsewhere.
complete.
That's all, right, I just wanted to make sure that that was
Yeah.
a different thing that is, but because you say ad hoc, and I was like, is that what?
Yeah, so the kind of ad hoc type scenario that wouldn't fall under this is you have a laptop and typically you work in the office, you're able to work from home, your car breaks down and you're
Okay.
not able to get into work on that day, rather than have to take a vacation day. If you can be productive and work
Great.
and best serve the city, then we're okay with you working from home in that circumstance.
Yeah, there's
Yes, yeah, this,
leniency and managerial discretion to say, yeah, you can do that or.
yeah, so if somebody has a telecommuting agreement in place, that is a long-standing, subject to the policy being removed, telecommute agreement. An ad hoc arrangement would be temporary, short-term, kind of what we do already.
It's
Great.
Is there any position or person that would have a potential for this being full-time telecommuter, or is it not even contemplated? Everybody's,
So we discussed that as a leadership team. There are some positions that in theory could be done 100% from home. Around the leadership table, and this is why it's important that this came to council, around the leadership table, there was not any appetite to move to a scenario where we had employees working 5 days a week from home. I think the leadership team's preference was that it's important that people interact.
I would say there's something to be said about at least seeing your team partial of a week.
But if council wanted us to move in a different direction, we could consider that, but that was very much a pretty firm direction from the leadership team in terms of preference.
Yeah, I mean, my only caveat to that is if you have difficulty filling a position that is able to be remote, can you look outside of this geographical area, right? I mean, that's why tech company does it, right? Where we say, hey, we need tech support for broadband and we don't have enough people in Sherwood or in the area that are gonna do it. We can grab somebody from Washington who's gonna be remote you know what I mean? Like yeah, go ahead.
So one of the reasons why we determined that for us as an organization, we might not be in that place yet is the complication around the different
Taxes.
human resources rules, the payroll taxes. And quite frankly, we're just not resourced yet to be able to deal with that complexity of different payrolls. And
Yeah, that's fine.
As a contract employee.
yeah, that would be, yeah, I do think the other risk you have, whether you're The other risk you have is if you have an existing employee and you open them up to full-time development meeting and all of a sudden 6 months they just move out of the area.
Yeah.
And now you've created that situation, and now you have to handle it, or you have some other, so I'm just glad we're not even going down that road at all.
Yeah, that's fine. We can look at it if we need it.
Yeah, and we're trying to create a balance, I think, of what works in the modern world and what we need as an organization and just.
Great.
Okay,
So I think having that in the handbook and voting on the handbook all at one time seems fine, because the handbook would always need to be approved by council when changes come, so that policy can't change without another council approval, right?
and so that was a question that I think we wanted to sort of bring at the end.
Okay.
So I can ask it now if you want, or we can, continue through the individual elements, but certainly a topic we would like to table is to what extent can some of this handbook just get updated as it needs to be updated rather than a big process versus policies coming individually, because really this handbook and most handbooks are just a collection of policies. That's what they are. It's your rules for your organization with some policies on things. So I think some guidance for going forward as to what council would like to see or not, I think will be helpful.
Maybe we should put that to the end like you want.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Okay, so in the presentation, I went through all of the changes that were in there. That are things that are new, but these are all things that are either a CIS approved policy or the law. We've got to do it, or it's a CIS policy that they're recommending in handbooks. And as our insurer, it makes sense to move forward with that. So moving on to kind of key recommended modifications. So these are not new policies. This is just a change in language or a change in how we do something. So there's a couple that I wanted to bring to your attention for discussion, or just to really get, some guidance from council as to whether you were good with this. So we have in the compensation policy now, just confirmation that as a benefit of your employment, an employee may collect loyalty points resulting from business travel, but the employee themselves are responsible for any tax implications. So unless we have something in our policy, our employees cannot put in their rewards number when they travel, and often that comes with benefits.
So the answer, I was gonna ask the question, so if I use a credit card, I'm an employee, hypothetically, Craig's an employee, he uses a personal credit card he gets cash back.
So this is simply the kind of loyalty club membership, not the use of personal credit cards. So we do not allow employees to book their travel on personal credit cards. We have company P cards for that.
Or buying other stuff for reimbursement.
But they could put in their Marriott number and get the
Correct.
points for staying there, even though it's paid for by a company
Yes.
card.
Just after that hypothetical, because I was like, I don't do any cashback cards, but I see these ads for them, so.
Yeah, so
That makes sense.
we have P cards, so, major purchases like travel and expenses are put on P cards. So performance evaluation, a purchasing card, I'm sorry. Even I'm down with the link.
I know, geez.
Wow.
Nobody ever says that in
Right.
another.
I've never heard that term before tonight,
P card?
or purchasing card for that matter,
No, they're called credit.
or per credit card.
I'd like to say that it's a Brit thing, but it's not. I picked it up here, so I want to be blameless in this. David?
Blame the Scots,
Point to the finance director. Okay, so one of the changes that we have made, this is really just to allow us some broader timeframes in terms of our performance evaluations. The way the handbook is written currently is it must be done at the 1-year anniversary. This just allows us a broader time frame. It also just allows me a bit of broader scope for if we want to change our criteria for performance evaluation or the form, or making it more appropriate to jobs.
Sounds good.
PTO cash out. So again, this is, we labeled it as discretionary. The change is that currently in the handbook, there are a restricted number of times a year that an employee can apply to cash out some PTO. We are not recommending any changes to those rules with the exception that we would allow that cash out to take place at any point during the year so that the workload is more equally spread out through the year versus clumping in November and December or all in January. This also allows employees better flexibility to manage their own PTO and accruals. So that's why that's in there. It kind of has a benefit to the employee in that it gives more flexibility on it, has a benefit to us because it more evenly distributes the workload in terms of when the application comes in.
So they still have to have used 80 hours in the past 12 months. They still
Yeah.
have to keep an 80-hour balance and then they can sell back whatever.
Correct. Yeah. The only rule that has changed is the restriction around this happens in November, December and
I
January.
mean, that makes sense.
David, from a financial standpoint, do you care? Like, does it drain an account if 20 people say, hey, we want to do it in September, it's all
Right
money spent?
right now, as Lydia said, I mean, you have folks. I mean, the police are a little different, they have little built in their contract, I think. Different timeframes, but, you know, everyone's cashing out November, December, January, so. We talk to senior leadership, and I'm like, I'm fine with.
The workload, if you get 2 here and 2 there instead of 20 here.
And the problem you do see is some employees, if they're out for some reason, whether it's the workers' comp, they might be maxed out, so they have no option because they missed the time frame and sort
So they're losing
of.
PTO.
They're losing
Yeah,
out.
it seems like a no-brainer. I just was wondering if somehow it's another burden on your staff.
No,
It's less of
we
a-
checked.
Yeah.
I mean, we would, so yeah.
But yeah, even having a PTO cash out as an option is so foreign to me.
I know.
Intel lets us do that.
Okay,
Never heard of
so,
someone doing that.
yes.
The city manager is the one who's approving and denying these. Is there any form of appeal at that point for the employees, or is it?
So, the only reason that one would get a cash out would be denied is if there were not enough funds in the city bank accounts to be able to pay it out, or if somebody had not met the eligibility criteria. So if they hadn't taken 80 hours PTO in the previous 12 months,
Yeah.
and if they weren't leaving 80 in their bank. So outside of that, there really is not that much flexibility for discretion.
Okay,
Okay, so you have to
Like, you
take 2
get
weeks
it,
a
you
year,
don't.
you have to have 2 weeks in your bank or you
Yeah,
can't do it.
this isn't like, hey, I wanna
Drain my
not
account.
use any, become exhausted, have to take sick and then burn
Right,
out
right.
PTO instead.
I just didn't know how much discretionary leeway they have, or if it's just, he's
Not
just.
a lot.
the
Following the-
authoritative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch and wax his car and go for.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from council is that you're fine with that change.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then in terms of sick leave, again, we're just moving to mirror the ASME contract in terms of the wait periods. Then we've added into the handbook a statement that says, just makes it clearer, because unless you've been here for a long time, it's just not clear, that typically non-rep employee benefits will mirror those of the ASME contract. So that's how it's aligned, that's how it works. This just gives some clarity to
You
that.
don't necessarily have to take and tie every single detail of it has to be updated into the handbook.
Is there currently any policy or procedure in place that is different?
Same insurance plan, same insurance.
So
You don't have to answer that right now. I was just curious.
Well,
Laura, because
interesting.
it says that right there, unless a different policy or procedure. I'm like, well, is it?
interestingly, workers' comp, which is a pretty big topic change in here, is different, and it's different across all 3 contracts. So, well, when I say 3 contracts, it's different across the handbook, it's different in the SPOA contract, and it's different in the ASME contract. My recommendation to council would be that we have the same in each of them. And I do have some kind of research information I can share with you on this.
I've never
Yes.
heard the Hamburg contract. What is that?
Handbook.
Oh,
Handbook.
handbook, okay. That's
I'm
what I
sorry,
heard of it.
please feel free to tell me to slow down.
That's right. I was like,
Yeah.
you've got another contract we're negotiating of some sort.
Well, we may have another contract that we're negotiating.
I don't know, it's
but,
a sergeant or something. Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah. Okay, so the backdrop to this is the recommendation, well, I'll tell you what the recommendation is and then I'm happy to answer questions on it. I am recommending that the city allow an employee, or we will top up an employee's workers' compensation payment to make them whole for up to 120 days. After 120 days, we allow the employee to use their PTO or sick to top up their workers' compensation payment to make them whole.
That sounds.
Okay, great. That might be less discussion when I was like that, but that's wonderful. Any other questions on that? I'll take it.
This a while back.
Right, moving on, really.
Well, I did have one question in that area though,
I knew I should.
and it wasn't clear. It says, you know, employees pay a premium on their health insurance, right? It
Yes.
says deduction of employee insurance costs after 120 days. It says they will be deducted from their gross up during the 120 days.
Yes,
After the 120 days, what if they have no sick,
we pay.
no PTO, we
We
pay,
have
so
to
they
pay,
still
and then-
maintain their health insurance
Yes.
regardless,
Yeah.
okay?
And we have to maintain their health insurance, but what we do is come to an arrangement when they return to work to make an affordable payment plan. There are caps actually on how much we can deduct for their share.
That's why was my concern is that did they lose their health benefits after, wait, it wasn't clear how that worked, okay?
No, and the change in that is that they'll continue to accrue their leaves while they're on workers' compensation too. So you used to be able to hand us a check and exchange it for full pay, and we can no longer do that.
You could probably answer one other quick question on the workers' comp, because you said no longer can they endorse their checks over to you?
Yeah.
On the jury duty section, it says they can endorse their checks over to you. Is
Yeah.
that like workers' comp doesn't allow you to do that, but it wasn't that you, so they can still do that?
Yeah, so the code says that an employer may not allow an employee to forego temporary disability payments
And so
in
that's
exchange for
kind of-
full pay. So that's that, when they get that workers' compensation payment, that really is a temporary disability payment, and therefore we can't accept that. But a jury duty
Okay.
check in exchange is a different
Okay,
categorization.
perfect. I wasn't sure why that rule was about, and I'm like, well, we can accept one or the other, so, okay.
Yeah. And I'm glad you asked the question, because, you know, it's not necessarily clear. And that's it. They are the major changes that are not already in our handbook or in the CIS employee handbook. Yes, Councilor.
First, great job to you and the entire team for getting to this bit of work. Way overdue, very much needed. Awesome job. My question, the three people, do we have to track changes to the employee handbook like we track other laws and stuff that we adopt? So when we do land use stuff, we have to track the changes when the changes occurred. When we do the charter changes, we have to track From internal workings, do we have to do that with an employee handbook?
Ordinarily, yes.
So,
In this case, it's completely different. We're starting from scratch, essentially.
and so there is a version control page on the back of this, which is designed exactly for that. So anytime anything in this handbook changes on the version control page at the back of the handbook, it will be notated in there. I think there is a bigger question around, we are now incorporating a lot of policies that were standalone and housing them in one place. Because we have to assume that employees don't know to go to all these different things to find their policies. So there are policies in here that would previously have been internal administrative policies that might not have come in front of council. And so I think what would be helpful is to hear from council your feelings or recommendations on what you would like to see or not see. Is it policies that have a financial impact?
Oh, you're talking about in the future, if you want to
Yeah.
make changes, that's kind of where I was leaning. If there's some significant financial impact, then I
Yeah.
want to see it. Like, most of this to me feels like very operational. You all own operational. I don't have an opinion or the point, I don't have enough context to weigh in on whether we should change a policy from 3 days waiting period to 5 days waiting period or whatever, right? You all have all that information. To me, it's like, If something's gonna impact our budget, then let's talk about it. If something's how you run the day-to-day
What
operations
is
of the
best
city.
practices? For a city employee handbook in Oregon, so we're doing all new here, is this something that we put on the council agenda in this, for this version and adopt?
Yeah.
And then, or not, and then going forward, if there is a financial type
Yeah.
change or something that's not. Blah, 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 is that also?
Do you need us to adopt this?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to
You
adopt
have to
this.
You have to adopt the new handbook.
Okay.
But we can, it can absolutely be the case that only certain elements have to come forward to council for approval.
Well,
And that is pretty typical.
I would say, I mean, my philosophy on it would be, if we adopt this, we still give you guys the ability to do the administrative things and, once a year or once every other, or twice a year or whatever, you say, hey, we recommend updating this handbook with these policies that we've had to put in place, from administrative, but we feel like they're significant enough and we do another one of these, except it'll be shorter because we've just added a couple of things, right?
The challenge of that, though, is that in the interim, they can't enact the new policy.
So they can. What I'm saying is, they still do the way they've been doing it the last 10
And
years.
then what do you do when they bring it to us to say, oh, we don't like that policy, but they've been doing it now for 6 months?
Yeah, in the policy, it says, we're doing this until it's officially approved.
So if.
I guess I would rather see it written the way of. Whatever we say the bar is, changes above this bar.
Yeah.
Need to be approved by city council, changes below this bar. City
Well, how is
manager.
this different than what you just said about, hey, we're gonna try it for a bit, right? I would rather them feel free to experiment with policies on a short-term basis and come to us every 6 months and say, hey, we've been doing this, here's the pros, the cons. We recommend making this change to the handbook and make it official.
I guess I would say we don't even need to approve that. If they try something for 6 months and they think it's right, they can just
But
continue.
doesn't our charter say we have to approve every
No.
policy?
No.
Why did I have such a hard time approving the library policy then? I was
That's
told,
Boards and commissions.
okay, all right.
So this is very much an internally
Okay.
focused document that really is like our set of operating guidelines for how we work with our people internally. I can't comment, I'll defer to the attorney on that, but I would assume that those other policies are more externally focused. My preference would be that council give us the ability to pretty much own this as a mainly internal document, but come to council if there is something of substantive financial impact
I agree.
and seek consent with it, and we will come with the recommendation as we would do normally on anything big.
Like, something like the workman's comp thing is a good example.
Mhm.
Right, that should be something
Yes,
if
I
you
agree.
should just be able to change that.
Yeah.
Like, we can't say no to it, so
The
let's,
cash out policy. That's no
Right.
financial impact. That's, I mean,
Discretionary things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's.
yeah, or the law changed.
Yeah,
There's
so
nothing
those
we can do
things,
about that.
right,
So again, so back to it's some rudimentary process, but from a process standpoint.
yeah.
You're gonna ask us to adopt all of this,
Yeah.
and then when there is a change in the future. How do we track that change? Following best practices and the law, and since we adopted this version. Do we have to? Adopt the newest version once a year with the budget or to incorporate those things? Or not, or just the things that are meeting whatever financial criteria. So I'm just collectively making sure that you're thinking out loud, we're following records and and all that minutia that we generally don't care about, but I'm just kind of curious.
So what is the records retention on employees manual?
Employee manual,
Yeah.
if the manual is adopted by legislation, is permanent. So every time the manual comes back for updates, you need to adopt that update. So if your original plan is to adopt it via legislation, that makes that document permanent.
So, and then so changes would need to be readopted?
If that was based on the change, so the council decided, we don't need to see that policy, it's administrative. So you guys decide which level of amendments that document has. If it's amended, then it has to be amended via legislation. If you adopt it via legislation, it needs to be amended via legislation.
Okay, what's our other option besides adopting it by legislation? Could we just give her a big wink and say, this is our manual?
Well, I mean, it's ordinance versus, isn't this ordinance versus resolution kind of thing?
Sebastian,
Yeah, so we can adopt it as a resolution, and it's not legislation.
Chime in, counselor.
that is legislation.
I'm not sure which question to answer.
Resolution would not be legislation, right?
Resolution?
Yeah.
So I guess,
Resolution is a type of legislation.
so I guess the question, Sebastian, is do we have the ability to determine if only certain elements of the handbook have to come in front of council for approval to change?
Well, I think that the handbook must be approved by council.
Yes.
But there can be some operational things that aren't in the handbook that can still be functionally done internally. I mean, it really.
So it'd be a policy change potentially. So the administrative policies that
Yeah.
we.
So.
So anything in the handbook would have to come back to council, any change to anything in the handbook would have to.
Any amendments to the handbook would have to be
So
approved.
could we do this? Could we do consent agenda for?
Yeah.
Minor, you know.
And once a year to just make
I like
sure.
that.
that
Just
the
do
state
it.
Highlight the changes.
See, I'm forcing you all to have to make sure that we're all on the track of whatever the.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I
So
appreciate
what-
that.
Law.
what if we did
Glad
like
Phil
the-
was here.
I wanna make sure everyone's happy with where, I'm not getting an ethics, whatever complaint filed for.
You follow the handbook.
Unless there was something
Oh,
major that needed to
Yeah.
be pointed out to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
David, what's your definition of substantial financial aid?
Well, it sounds like she's gonna have to bring anything to us anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think if we look at it, or, I mean, I think you guys know.
It should be reviewed.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So we-
12 years, come on.
I mean.
I never want to have to do this again.
Employees are gonna turn to the handbook to find out what their expectations are.
That brought
And
me
if
back.
it's not in writing in the handbook, then it's easy that it would just be
As we
misunderstood.
found out over the last few years.
So that brought me back to a question I was gonna ask earlier based on
Yes.
something you said. You said that a lot of the stuff that's in here is kind of currently existing in various places, so. In the resolution to adopt this, or in it itself, we should call out that this supersedes
Yes.
all of those things, and ideally we go and find and get rid of all of those things.
It says that in the introduction.
But okay, let's keep the records and saying that, yeah, this is what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that occurs to me is, I mean, the city manager already has, for example, spending authority to, I don't know what it is, $150,000. You know, what if we did something along the lines of if the financial impact of the city is less than $150,000, it goes on consent, and if it's more than that, it comes as a work session.
We can pull it up and send it,
Yeah.
if somebody has heartburn about the topic,
Yeah.
so that's easy.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, given that city manager already has that kind of authority to make.
It's a good bar.
But it's important to note that the city manager has a one-time authority for that amount.
It can't be $150,000
Yeah.
annually, yeah.
Do you mean you can't give me a pay raise every month?
It's not $1 million, impact for the next.
Well, we got really sorry, Kristen.
Interest in updating.
Two more things,
Yeah.
but Taylor, I think.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is there somewhere in the beginning part of this that says, and we could have policies that could be added to this that are not, because what it sounds like we're saying is, this is the law of the land for the employees. However, if something comes up that was not contemplated here, you still have the authority to issue a policy, administrative policy.
Yeah.
And then at a once a year meeting, we decide, I mean, assuming it's not a.
Already by default.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, is it clear in here that this is the law of the land unless we add to it with a policy, and then once a year it'll be reviewed by you to be made a permanent part of this, if it's
So I
supposed to
think
be, right?
I think if we had a policy that was a big policy that needed to be added to this, I wouldn't be waiting for the year.
Okay,
review. I would
but
just
even if
bring
it-
it on consent and say, there's this policy that
Okay.
needs to be added.
How small?
Right, but is there,
How small the thing that the city manager or the city attorney, establishes.
Yeah.
City attorney, I recommend, the city manager establishes. How do you judge if the thing needs to belong in the handbook or not?
that's where the HR person comes in, right? If you feel like.
Job.
So,
So
Yeah.
so
I think it's gonna be fine.
Clear some things up.
Yeah.
the handbook is intended to give managers discretion on certain things. So if we're talking about a small change, it would be within that discretion. If the entire policy change, such as, we wanted to narrow or expand that discretion, then it needs to go in the handbook and it needs to be approved.
I think.
I think we got that.
I'm clear.
I'm
It's
just-
clear.
sorry for the little sidetrack, but just want to get that noted out.
I think I'm understanding. If there's something that changes the intent of a policy that's beyond language, we can bring it to council on a consent agenda. If it is a policy change that changes the intent of the way that we manage our people, then that is something we would bring to a work session, just as we would have done previously, basically.
I trust you'll bring to us what we need to know.
Thank you. I appreciate that trust.
But I have two more things.
Yes, I am happy to
Sorry,
answer
people.
them.
On page 13 of under the cost of living allowance,
Yes.
COLA, it says the budget committee shall approve or deny, and actually that would be the city council, because the budget committee makes the recommendation to city council.
So that language was lifted out directly out of the 2012 handbook.
It's outdated.
So we can change it. That is, we can change it. Sebastian and I can work up language that says on recommendation from the through the
budget to city council, yeah.
We can get that changed.
So he doesn't have that authority.
And then,
Children know how to date is, right?
One thing to caution you on, if you change your budget by more than 10%, it gets kicked back down to the budget committee. Just an FYI, but I understand what you're saying.
So what,
No, that's not the question. The question is just, the budget committee makes a recommendation on the,
on the cost.
on the, what, COLA, and then it gets incorporated in the
10% would
budget,
be
it
a
goes to
pretty
city council
significant
to
number.
approve.
So the way the current handbook is worded is that the budget committee agree the COLA and
So it's still the budget committee is making a recommendation, is wanting to make a
the
recommendation.
approval comes from council.
Yeah. What's the approval? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The authority comes from
Maybe
council.
we three sit down and just flesh out that.
Yes.
you understand what we're trying to say.
No, I understand. I'm just.
Yeah. And then the last one was under the PERS, page 47 in the version I had. Letter B, PERS, Public Employee Retirement Systems, paragraph 2, it says the city will consider allowing PERS eligible, and I thought that my opinion should say may, because I looked up our work back program, and nowhere in that policy does it say we would look at every individual employee.
So I think so the reason for it saying we will consider is that if we start to pick and choose whom we wouldn't even consider, then we're opening ourselves up to a discrimination type claim. Just the consideration of it does not mean approval of it.
So this is the process where we're considering.
Correct, yeah.
Do we have coverage for that position still?
Correct.
Is that position gonna be
Yeah.
too hard to fill?
Yeah.
Will that be a benefit still for the city?
Yeah.
Okay,
Because the alternative would then read, the city may consider allowing an employee to even apply. So this is more.
We will consider it. We may or may not
consider it.
approve
We
it.
might not say
Gotcha.
yes, but we will consider it at least, which means that what we're doing is providing a parameter where everybody gets the same opportunity to at least.
It is a know that I read it cover to cover.
I love that you did, because I applaud you all for reading it. It's been a labor of love and not one that I have done.
That's very well done.
I had so much
Lot of
trust in you, I did not read it cover to cover.
Well, it's taken a village.
I want to color coded.
You got the colors, maybe. All of leadership have input into this, the HR specialist has, we've had lots of attorney eyes on it, so.
So the next steps is reword whatever you need to reword and then bring it back for our consent agenda on the next one.
Yeah, we can bring back
That's right.
6/18 and
Yeah.
then implement July 1st.
Yes, great.
So the next big topic outside this that we need to take a shot at is our safety manual. So, no, it's not.
Who's on point with that? You again?
So.
Just.
You ready for that? It is another document that it's been a while, I think, 99 to.
Now you'll wait until this is approved.
The ink isn't even dry on the.
Anyway, so that's another possible setback.
Just determined to break me.
So,
I've hit that 2-year anniversary mark, so.
Trying to drive you out.
That way.
Anybody have anything else? If not, we'll adjourn this meeting at 8:31.
awesome.
Thank you very much, council.